Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. Today, we are talking about how you can stop fixing and start leading. And this is a topic that has come about because we recently ran a masterclass in Career Club on coaching skills for leaders. And we know that so many people can fall into the trap of just giving advice. And the whole purpose of the workshop was to help people develop their coaching skills so that they can empower their people and become more effective leaders. So it was a really good workshop. And there's so many light bulb moments in the workshop as we were going through. And I think the first question that Jackie asked everyone, which was a brilliant question, was what percentage of your conversations currently involve giving advice? And there was no surprise that a good majority of the conversations that people were having were based on giving advice rather than asking questions or providing coaching within those conversations to help people find answers and develop their skills. Jackie, why do you think people fall into this trap of giving advice rather than taking more of a coaching approach to leadership?
It's a great question, and I think there are a number of factors that play into it. So I think, first of all, people are not often on the receiving end of great role models for managers who naturally take a coaching-based approach. So a lot of the time, people will have got to a situation in their career where they're responsible for other people without having been on the receiving end of something that they can then role model with their teams. Also, in today's environments, so much of it is time pressure, where it feels that giving advice is the quickest and easiest way often to solve problems. So when somebody comes to you, very often what they will do is ask for advice, and it's very easy to just give that advice in response to the question that you've been asked. It's the quickest thing, it's the easiest thing, it's done and dealt with, it's off your plate and on to the next. And therefore, that then becomes a habitual thing where, as leaders and managers, we just get into this mindset and this approach where we feel like we're supposed to be solving problems, answering questions, keeping things moving, and that becomes a habit in its own right. So lots of different interconnected factors, but it was really striking. So if you're listening to this now, I think this could be really interesting for you to ask yourself that question of what percentage of your own conversations do involve giving advice. We found when we asked that question in the workshop, typically was at least 50%, and some people were as high as 70% of their conversations. So we're not saying that you're going to try and never give advice and that your role is never to give advice. But if you are sitting in that typical region of kind of 40 to 60%, which was broadly speaking the range that we had, then I think it's good to benefit from looking at why you do it, whether you need to do it as much as you currently do, and what the benefits might be of dialing up some more of the coaching approach.
Do you know what, though? It's a really interesting point because I bet you some people who are listening are thinking, how often do I actually do that? And I don't think it's until you actually take a second to maybe analyze some of your conversations, or you'll do it now because you've listened to this, every interaction that you have with your team, you'd be like, am I giving advice or am I trying to coach them through this thing that they've got going on? And I think you need to start being a little bit more self-aware, don't you, in order to realize, am I giving advice or am I supporting this person and developing their skills? But I do think it's one of those things that when you realize there's like that real transition period, isn't it? Where you go, oh my goodness, I am just giving advice. And this is why when I'm not here, they don't know what to do. This is why there's so much pressure on me. This is why I feel so overwhelmed because everybody wants a piece of me. And it's almost like that light bulb moment, isn't it? Where you go, oh my goodness, like I could actually make my life easier if I stop giving advice. And it sounds quite counterintuitive, but it can make a huge difference to your day to day and to your work-life balance because it's going to save you so much time.
It's really interesting as well to think very often people underestimate the percentage of time that they give advice. So people will think that they are coaching because they've asked questions, but sometimes the way they frame the questions is leading people towards a conclusion, or they're asking questions to get clarification and their brain in the background is doing the work to try and solve the problem. And while they have asked questions, they then come out with suggestions, ideas, ways to approach things. So yeah, I think it's really helpful for people to start to consider, how much am I doing it? Am I maybe doing it more than I realize? And like you say, can my life be a little bit easier if I can find ways to get other people to solve their own issues and come up with their ideas? Because people buy in more when they come up with their own solutions. They're more invested, they're more likely to buy in, they're more likely to see things through. So there are so many benefits to striking the right balance and not too heavily leaning on advice.
Yeah, and I loved the books that you shared as well within that workshop because there's some really good tools and techniques that you presented within that masterclass. And when you first told me about them books, I was like, oh, these sound interesting and I'm going to have a read. And I thought at that time, wow, I wish I would have read these books like back when I was in my corporate career, when I was trying to progress, when I was managing a team. So talk to us about the books because I absolutely love them and we'll share the links in the show notes too.
So there were two books that I recommend for people, and they're both written by an author called Michael Bungay Stanier. As Pam said, we'll share the links in the show notes. The way they were written is that the first one is called The Coaching Habit, and we have spoken about that on previous episodes, and that's all around building your coaching skills. He terms it as becoming more coach-like. So rather than as a manager feeling like you have to be a professional coach and step into coach mode from manager mode, his whole ethos is that your approach can be more coach-like. So offering less advice, using more coaching skills. And the second book that was written, but the book that I tend to recommend people read first, is The Advice Trap. And this is the one that really, I think, helps to open people's eyes up and build awareness of where maybe with great intention, they are falling into this place of trying to fix rather than trying to lead. And what that then is creating is what he terms the advice trap. So I would definitely recommend both of them if you're in a situation where you're managing and leading teams. And I would recommend start with the advice trap, even though that was the one that was written second.
Yeah, I loved The Advice Trap, and I actually read them the other way around. And then I was like, it makes so much sense when you say read The Advice Trap first. And I loved The Advice Monster as well, and those three personas that sit within that. Because I think when you can visualize it and you're having those conversations, and now I think to myself, am I in advice monster mode? And I'm using that as a way to prompt myself and think about my communications and interactions with people that work for us, with people generally. So talk us through those personas.
So he has what he calls the advice trap, and then there's 3 versions of the advice monster that can come about. And the idea with this is that there are essentially 3 triggers that can prompt different forms of a drive as an individual to give advice. And the first is tell it. So this is where you feel that urge to try and solve issues for other people by sharing your knowledge or experience, often for your own team, for people that you line manage, but can also be for other people more broadly. So if you're on project teams, for example, or with colleagues, I've seen this happen in a number of ways and a number of different levels. And that intent is positive. I want to try and make things get solved more quickly, more easily. I've got knowledge and experience, so I'm going to jump in and help out. And I'm going to tell you, do this. But what I encouraged our members to think about when we ran the masterclass was when you're on the receiving end of this. And I think that's when people sometimes have that slightly uncomfortable moment, because they can very easily feel, oh, great, I can help, I can share my skills and experience. But then when you think, what does that feel like when people feel that need to jump in really quickly, and you might not necessarily have asked them, or you might still be doing your own thinking, how does that feel? And that can feel really disempowering. It takes away the chance for other people to explore their own ideas or reflect or just have the thinking time and space. So it's almost like, just because you've got that knowledge and experience to share doesn't mean you immediately have to jump in and share it. Sometimes people learn and gain from that reflection time and space.
Yeah, and I suppose that there's the sides of it then, that's the actual cost of giving too much advice, isn't there? If you're somebody that does jump in with that advice, it's like, what is the impact that is having on your team, on your department, on the things that you're trying to deliver? And then you've also got the other aspect as well, where it's about really thinking about staying curious. So asking the questions, getting as much information as you can, helping and then supporting that person into finding what is essentially their own answers. I'm sure when most people arrive at your desk and they've got a big issue and they need your help, 9 times out of 10, they know what they need to do. They've got some kind of fear that is stopping them from taking action. And I think that's something that you also probably need to unpack, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you tell someone, the underlying message is that you have the right answer and they might not be able to come up with the right answer. And so you ignore that they might be 70, 80% of the way there. Whereas when you ask questions and you gain an understanding of how far along that line are they, you might still end up telling them the bit to close some of the gap, but they don't need all of the rest of what you shared, because they might have either done already or been able to do that thinking for themselves. So yeah, great example of how that curiosity can not completely get rid of giving advice, but just reduce and tailor where you might do it in a way where it doesn't feel like you're stamping all over somebody's thoughts and ideas, but where you're doing it to just close those final gaps with the bits that they actually do want to know from you.
That makes total sense. So what is the next part of that?
So the next advice monster or trigger is save it. And this is the times where you're driven by that urge to protect other people from making mistakes or feeling uncomfortable. So you're effectively trying to give them solutions to save them from feeling uncomfortable or from being challenged. And again, it's well intended, but it's helpful for people to develop their own problem solving skills. It's helpful for people to make mistakes and be able to learn from them. And if you consistently jump in to give advice that's going to try and save somebody from doing the wrong thing, or say it this way rather than say it that way, you're not treating them like an adult. You're treating them like you're the responsible adult and they're this child that you've got to look after. And it stifles growth. It stops people having those opportunities to have experiences that they can learn from. And again, I know I keep saying it, but it's done with this drive where you feel like you're doing the best for somebody else. Making somebody feel comfortable all the time and not stretched and not challenged actually isn't the best thing for them. It might be
Yeah,
the most
and
comfortable thing for them, but it's not necessarily the best thing for them. And I had an example just today where somebody was talking about a member of their team who might find it difficult to say no. So their solution that they were thinking was I could give them some ways of doing it, some lines and how they could handle those situations. And you want to save them from saying the wrong thing, but it won't make them feel any more comfortable saying no using these lines that you fed them. The bit that's uncomfortable is that they're going to have to find a way to be able to say no. So let them find their way through that discomfort of having to say no, support them to figure out the best ways to do it, but don't try and jump in and save them from that discomfort by giving them things that feel comfortable for you to say.
yeah, it is so easy to just jump in and try and rescue people, but in the long term, it's not going to help them. And it's definitely not going to help you, because if they're feeling more empowered, then that's going to just take a load of pressure off you. So what's the final mindset? And every time when I read this book, I was drawing out my own little versions of the monsters, because when I write stuff down or do some little doodles, it really helps me like cement things in my mind. So when we're talking about this, I'm just like going back to my little drawings of the little monsters, just so that like that was something that kind of came back to me really easily. And that could be something that other people do as well, to almost like cement that information in their minds as well, to help them remember.
So the final one is control it. And this definitely, for me, for people that know me and have worked with me, will probably recognize as to this is one of the triggers for me. This is the situation where you feel a sort of compulsion. So it's not quite control freakery, but it's almost, you feel like you want to take charge of the direction and the outcomes. So in my case, a lot of this is driven by pace. So I will feel the need to take charge of direction and outcomes, particularly if other people aren't moving at the pace that I would like to move at. So what happens with this is you feel like there's a need to control it by imposing answers or decisions. So that's what I mean about the pace thing for me, where I feel like, definitely, come on, let's go, let's make a decision, let's do this. So I will probably push in that instance, and I definitely recognize that this can be a strong one for me. The other times can be where there is perhaps risk or uncertainty, and you feel like you want to maybe create some certainty for other people. So if you are working with people who struggle with uncertainty, then that can be a trigger of let's create some certainty by you giving advice or saying, let's do this. You create that sense of certainty and security. So again, not that you would never, ever need to do it. Some of those things can be positive outcomes from giving advice or fixing. But by the same token, if it's done too much or done too quickly, then it can also reduce trust and undermine other people's autonomy. So it can feel like you just expect people to follow and you're going to be the one that takes charge. And so particularly over time, this can be one where people then look to you as the fixer. People look to you to make the quick decision. And it might not even feel like advice necessarily, this one, more so I would say leans into that fixing thing. But yeah, this can be quite a tricky one to shift, speaking from personal experience.
Yeah, I think if you're stuck in that mindset of needing to control everything, it can be quite difficult to come out of that because you're so used to controlling everything and making sure that everything runs in line, and you're giving the advice out and people are taking the advice and running with it. I think that's where the self-awareness piece is really key, isn't it? That's where you need to go, hold on a minute, by doing that. And I suppose it's probably a good idea for people to think about which advice monster or which advice trap am I falling into on a day-to-day basis, and even just like carving out a couple of minutes a day to just actually have a think about it. Because overall, if you can figure out which advice trap you're falling into, then you can start changing your behavior and the way that you handle things and becoming more effective. So in terms of some practical strategies for taming these little monsters, what would be your kinds of your go-to tips around that?
So I agree that self-awareness is so key. And I think that for me is probably the biggest part. So I would encourage people to explore not just which of these do I feel I fall into, because it's not a choice of three where I fall into one or two or three, but also consider, are there triggers with specific individuals, for example? Are there individuals that you might feel protective of that bring out that tendency to save them from discomfort? Are there times where you feel like you are the expert in the room and therefore that might trigger you to tell it and be the person who gives all the answers up front quickly and easily because you feel like you're the expert and you've got all the answers? So it can be context or situations or individuals that might prompt individual advice monsters to crop up. And I would say as well to really be open and honest with yourself and not blame yourself with this, because none of this is saying that advice is wrong or that you should never do it. The point is, the more you fix, the more that you're relied on to be the fixer. So if you position yourself in that role of being the advice giver and the fixer, then you are creating that problem for yourself. And therefore, what you need to do is to be able to actually be quite compassionate to yourself and understand that it is natural that these are reactive ways to be. When someone asks a question, asks you for advice, of course it's natural that you give advice, even if in reality, giving immediate advice is not always in the best interest of the person. Is quite hard to resist that when they've specifically asked for it. So I think the first step for me is to really explore, where does it happen, what contexts and what individuals trigger the different ones, and then to consider in those instances and in those circumstances, how do you want to be, almost set an expectation of what do you want to work towards. If 70% of your conversations now involve giving advice, you might want to initially work towards, let's get that down to 50. You set yourself those smaller steps and be kind to yourself rather than expect that, oh, I'm just doing it all wrong and I should be coaching. I think that's the thing. People often feel like I should be coaching all the time and I shouldn't be giving any advice. And it's like, that isn't the point. If you're coaching all the time and never giving advice, that can be equally frustrating, where people are like, just tell me the bloody answer. You know it. I know you know it. Just give it me and let me move on.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the bit, isn't it, where you need to make the call on whether I ask questions or I give the advice because it's needed in that situation. And I think moving from that tell mindset to the ask mindset, it can be quite tricky and it does take some time. It's even, I know I could say that sometimes I'm still guilty of just giving advice because I know the answer. And then sometimes I'll give the advice and then I'll think, do you know what? I probably could have helped that person find that answer. And maybe I've done them a little bit of a disservice by just giving them the advice. By that point, they've gone off, they've done it. But I always make a mental note that next time I will ask rather than tell, and just see if they can support themselves, if they do know the answer. And it is all part of learning and developing and growing. Like, nobody's ever going to be perfect at this, are they? And I don't think it matters like how long you've been doing it. We train on all of this stuff. We're not always completely perfect on everything, but the self-awareness is super important, because as long as you are being intentional, as long as you are almost like analyzing those conversations and not over analyzing them, like, we're not saying you need to spend hours and hours backtracking over conversations and thinking, could I have done that better? It's just in the moment, did I tell or did I ask? It's just a real simple kind of just checking in with yourself. And also you'll see the difference with your team members and how they respond and react to you as well.
I used to be famous. There was donkeys years ago, relatively early in my career, there was somebody who, I remember her saying, whenever I come to you, I know your first question is going to be, what would you do if it was your own business? So she got into that situation where when she would come to me for advice, she still would come, but she knew that would be my question. And then she would talk me through, I know that's what you're going to ask me, but I can't think of anything. Or I've got this option or this option, and I'm not sure which to go with. So it definitely takes time. It takes effort. And I think you can also sometimes be honest with people that you've recognized that you want to do less of giving advice. And so sometimes if they are stuck and what they really want is advice, then that's okay. You can have that conversation and they can tell you. So it doesn't have to be all cloak and daggers, and you won't get it right every single time. I remember when I read The Coaching Habit, as a professional coach, I've been coaching probably for a couple of years, maybe 3 years by that point, as a profession. And still there were questions and things in that book that I took and put into my coaching practice, but also into my leadership development work as well.
Yeah, and I think you covered some of those questions, didn't you, in the masterclass that we did in the Career Club. So if you want access to that and you want to be able to watch that masterclass back and get the understanding of those questions and how you can use them within your day-to-day job, or, you know, when you are coaching your team members, then the link to join Career Club is in the show notes. So make sure you check that out if you want more on this. So hopefully you've enjoyed this episode today and you've taken at least one thing away. And we always love to hear from you, to know what you have taken away from the episodes, and keep telling us what you want us to cover, and make sure that you're telling us what topics would be useful for you, especially for 2025. And as usual, make sure that you share the podcast with anybody that you think it might help. And don't forget to rate and review us. And all of the links and things that we've talked about will be in the show notes. And we'll be back next week with another episode.
Exciting news from us. If you're an ambitious leader or manager earning 50k or more and you're ready to take your career to the next level, we have an opportunity for you. Introducing Catalyst Career Club, your secret weapon for unlocking career success. As a member, you'll get access to monthly live training sessions, exclusive job opportunities, and the ability to get personalised advice from us on your toughest career challenges.
We've helped thousands of driven leaders like you secure significant pay rises, land dream roles, and thrive in their careers. And now we want to support you in achieving your most ambitious career goals too. Membership is just $6.99 per month with no contract or tie-in. And as a special bonus for being our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast at checkout to get your first month for just £1. Head over to pamelalangan.com/Catalyst Career Club to sign up now, and we'll see you inside.